Hey, what's up? Jason here from Unity3D.college. Today I wanted to start a new series where I'm going to talk about what it's like to actually work on a real AAA game where you're working with a big team and just kind of going through that process. What's the day-to-day like? What kind of things do you run into? What are the coolest parts about it? Now, I'm going to start this off small, and I think I'm going to begin today with just kind of like my first day on a game development job. But if you're interested in this kind of subject, make sure that you hit the like button and share it and all that stuff. If it's popular enough, I will keep doing these and just go deeper and deeper into detail. So my first actual game job was working in the QA department on Vanguard Saga of Heroes. It's a big MMO game with a giant open world and a lot of content. I was really excited about it, and I was hired on to do developer or tester tools. So it's building tools for the development team to look at stuff and for the QA team to test faster. The QA team was actually really, really tiny when I got on there. I think it was one other person. There was one other guy that came on a little bit later. But it was a small team, and I spent a lot of the time just developing actual tools for the game designers. But that job only lasted about 3 weeks. And then massive layoffs came. So I found out along this process, I'd been there for, I guess it was about 3 weeks, and I found out, hey, the company had been sold to Sony, and it was really just Sony taking over and helping out. There was a lot of financial things going on there. It wasn't like it was sold just for the hell of it. But anyway, it was sold to Sony, and there had already been plans for who was going to be laid off, who was going to be kept, before I even got hired. They'd had the whole thing all figured out, and just it was all secret, like it always is with these big companies. Anyway, 3 weeks in, I get laid off. Shortly after that same day, somebody told me, hey, you weren't around when we had done all this stuff, and we think we can get you back onto the team. So I was like, all right, cool. Skip ahead, maybe 4 or 5 weeks, the final offer came through, and I started up my job as an actual full-time programmer on the game. But the primary focus was to take over tools development. They had a good number of development tools that are really, really vital to the game. And if you've worked on an MMO before, you know that the tools are kind of like the most important thing to make the game good. If you don't have good tools, it's nearly impossible to make a game good. I've seen people struggle all the time, but I could talk about tools all day long. Anyway, this is day one. So consider all the rest of that, day 0, day negative something. That was 3 weeks of me just kind of playing around, learning the database, building some little tools that reported off of it, and not a whole lot else. As much as you could get done in 3 weeks of not really knowing what the hell you're doing and being totally overwhelmed, but having a lot of fun. So day one comes around, the first day of my actual job as a real programmer on the team. And it started off great. I went in, started setting up the hardware. The hardware was amazing. It always is with game companies from what I've seen. Maybe not for all the mobile companies, but anybody working on bigger games or PC games, they always seem to have great systems. So I go through, get everything set up. A couple hours later, it's time for our first stand-up. And the stand-up was interesting. This was my first time being at a stand-up that was so large. I'd done some software stuff in the past and worked on teams that had small stand-ups with like 3 or 4 of us. But this one, I walked in and there had to have been at least 20 people. There may have been more. Of course, my memory could be bad, but it seemed like a huge meeting. It was a really large room full of people standing in a circle. Everybody was standing. I think if you sat down in this meeting, it would have gone all day just because was so many people in there. Anyway, they start going through and everybody's listing off their things that they're working on. Like, hey, I'm fixing this performance issue. Somebody's reported these bugs. We're going and fixing them. Other people are working on just adding new systems to the game. Lots and lots of discussion about what they're doing. Most people went really quick. And then they finally came around to me like, hey, what are you working on today? And nothing. Like I set up my computer and now I'm just kind of looking at things, trying to figure out what the hell I'm supposed to do. Now at the time, like I said, the layoffs had just happened. Everything was really hectic. It's not like anybody had time to do a full onboarding right then. The game was just switched publishers and was fighting to stay alive and to be successful. There are lots of just performance issues and other things going on. Everybody was constantly fighting fires. So I wasn't too surprised that I didn't have like a full onboarding process. Plus, I really didn't think to expect one back then. So anyway, they asked me again, well, what are you working on? And I told them, hey, I don't really know. I was hoping somebody could tell me. And I got my first task. So the first task was, kind of terrifying. So the statement, or I don't remember exactly how it was worded. It was basically, hey, our designers are going through this terribly tedious process, and we need a new solution to make it not suck and not waste time and not cause all these bugs. Now, the process was that they would create all of the content data for the game, which is really like creating the game. So, they go in, they make the NPCs, they make the abilities, they make the items, they place them all, and they do this all on the internal dev server. They're using a tool that just connects to that internal dev server database, and they're doing all the work right there. But then it comes time to push that stuff out to the test server. So like, hey, now we're ready. We think that this area is good enough. We want to send this out to the test area. So the previous process, the process before I did anything on this, was pull it all up on one screen and then open another copy of the tool connected to the test database and then go redo all your work. Right? Just recreate everything, copy and paste as much as you can, and just recreate all of these things and hope it's good. Of course, as I'm sure you can imagine, in any manual system like that, problems just came up constantly. So people, make a little mistake, forget a thing, accidentally mislink something, and then something that passed all of the dev server QA is now going to fail on test server. And often, since there's so much of this stuff being done, and again, a tiny, tiny QA department, I guess at this time the QA department had grown a little bit because we started using Sony's QA department, but it was still tiny and it was nearly impossible to catch all that stuff. So all kinds of bugs, just getting right through. And on top of that, you're just wasting a ton of designer time. Imagine the joy that comes to a designer's face when they find out, hey, I've been working on this thing for 2 weeks. Now I'm going to go redo all of that on another database because that's our solution. So anyway, that was the task, right? Just create a system or a solution that will get rid of that problem, that solves that problem. And they had a couple ideas, like kind of loose ideas for what that would be. Maybe some kind of a SQL script, maybe some kind of a tool. Maybe it ties into the existing tool. How does it all work? I don't know. We don't know. And, it was essentially my job to figure it out. And I was totally lost. Just clueless. I went in, I was like, this is day one. Like most of the time you go in like on a day one job and you're setting some stuff up and maybe you'll go through and find a couple simple little bugs and fix those because you're getting comfortable with the code, like going in and fixing a naming bug or this subtracts 2 when it's supposed to subtract 1 or something. You usually hit the light, low-hanging fruit stuff first. But nope, this was just come in, you have a nice, huge, extremely vital task to, saving the company time and making everybody more efficient, and go figure it out. So, yeah. Anyway, I was terrified, trying to figure out what the hell to do. I get back to my desk and start asking. The first person I asked was the guy, Adam, who sat right next to me. Great guy. Adam, hi if you happen to be out there. Haven't heard from you in a long time. Anyway, he didn't know. I didn't know at the time, but I think he had just been there a little bit longer than me. It wasn't like, and we were both about the same age, so I just I didn't think that, hey, maybe I should ask like the senior programmers on the team how to do it. Although I think if I had, I'd have been just as confused or more so because they were kind of way outside my level. So anyway, he had recommended that I talk to Mike, who was our database administrator, and he is a super high paid, super great guy, SQL Server admin for Sony, and then had come on to Vanguard after that, and just doing awesome things, making the database work, and I could go on forever about how cool Mike was. But anyway, I'm just gonna skip ahead. So go over, talk to Mike, go into his office, and spend I don't know how long it was. It was probably half a day just going over the concepts, the the different ways that the thing could be done. He had been thinking about this problem too, so it was really a perfect fit because it was something that he had been considering doing himself, but he had all kinds of other tasks, and he'd even started to kind of prototype out a couple ideas. And he ran me through just the high-level structure of what was really trying to be done, and then explained a couple SQL tricks that might make it a little bit easier. And just talking through him with a whiteboard, we were able to, in, like I said, half a day, maybe probably less than that, it was probably more like 2 hours or so, come up with a really good solution that solved the majority of the problems that we had and really simplified things down. Now, I spent the next 2 weeks kind of going in and out of Mike's office, just asking questions, trying to learn as much as possible. At the time, I really knew very little SQL, and I'd say I was a terrible C# programmer. I didn't know it at the time, right? At the time, I thought I was the best programmer ever and knew everything about databases, and everything I did was going to be perfect. Everybody seems to do that, though. Well, at least most of us do. Anyway, so 3 weeks later, no, 2 weeks later, we finished it up. I got the first version of this thing out and done, and it actually worked. I was totally blown away. I don't know how much I can dive into the details, but essentially the way that the system worked was there's a primary design tool where designers would work on their content all day, and what they could do was just select a branch, somewhat like if you think of a source control branch, like a Git branch or whatever source control system you use. So they would select a branch, and any work that they did would just be saved into that branch. Now, when I say saved into that branch, it was really just a column on every single table that had a branch number. So it just had a branch ID, and whenever you updated or changed something with that row, it would get flagged with whatever branch ID you were working in. Wasn't the perfect solution, but it worked, I'd say 98% of the time, 99% of the time. So designers would go in, they'd build their things, they'd have their own little custom branch. Sometimes there would be a branch just for all of the things they're working on. They could make a new branch, so it could be like a little branch for a little tiny fix or a set of fixes that they're doing. And once they were done with all that work, it would just be tagged in the database with that branch number. And then there was another little tool that would just look for that data with the branch numbers and then push that data over. It would essentially copy the data doing some bulk SQL calls. Now, the way it worked too was it was kind of cool because you get a pretty little layout of a tree view of all of the things in the branch. So you could break it down by branch or by like type. So you could do like all the abilities and then see them by branch and then pick the ones that you wanted to do, or just pick them all, hit a button and get a little progress bar as it goes across. Now, I did take really strong advantage of third-party controls. If you've never done tools development before, third-party controls tend to be a huge part of them. If you're not using them, you tend to do a lot of extra work. And this is for Windows tools, not so much Unity specific tools. But I used a really cool one for that, made a nice, beautiful layout. Everything just kind of worked, and yeah, it solved the problem. Now, there was a little hiccup in the testing. I might talk about that later. It was kind of funny and a little mini disaster, but it wasn't too bad. And anyway, in the end, it turned out great. I was totally freaking terrified the entire time throughout testing, throughout building this thing. I was positive I wasn't going to be able to do it, but like I said, with a little bit of help from somebody else there, a little bit of mentoring and just assistance, I was able to get that done and come out looking pretty damn good. I was, like I said, I was totally blown away with my first day and just these first 2 weeks. It was way more than I had expected, but I also learned a ton and had a lot of fun doing it. So anyway, like I said, I'd like to just kind of dive into more of the day-to-day type stuff on, working on games for these kind of games, MMOs, and other stuff. So if you're interested in that, let me know. Just, drop a comment, hit the like button, and share. If this thing gets lots of views, then I'll definitely continue this series on. Anyway, thanks for watching. Have a great day, and keep making games.